What's going on, Reefers? Blaine here. In today's video, we are hanging out with Jed and we are sitting right next to his personal reef tank at home. So we're gonna get right into it, Jed. This is an awesome tank. Really excited to finally check it out, show it off on the channel. But let's talk about the tank itself. What kind of tank do we have here right next to us?
So this is a water box 20 gallon, all-in-one, pretty basic as it comes. A lot of the all-in-one tanks kind of fit in this 15, 20 gallon cube size. The system's been up and going, I want to say close to 5 years now. It's gone through a lot of iterations between being stuck in the back of a closet basically with no light and no sand and just rock and a random clownfish in there, to getting some corals in there and just going through the biggest hair algae bloom and Aptasia field as possible to where it's at now. We're pretty happy with how it's looking now.
It looks like you have mainly LPS in the tank. It's definitely super LPS dominated. I would have to say we've seen a couple of LPS dominated system, but this one's definitely super LPS dominated. Let's talk about some of your corals. I see some softies, a couple of sticks in the back. Let's go over some of your corals you have.
So up front, we have my colony of white zombies, which is probably the oldest coral. I've been growing that colony, not that specific colony, but I've had since the original piece. I probably had that colony about 6 years now. It's actually how I bought my first house, was selling those out of my college dorm room. And then I've had this rose petal Algae over here. I've had that probably about the same amount of time. I've been growing that colony about 6 years now. To where it's at now, where, you know, when it's fully extended, it's almost, I'm nervous it's gonna get chopped up by the MP10 a couple times. We got a bunch of Ganies in there, just kind of collected over the years. I like to stick with a lot of aquaculture pieces. They just seem to be a lot easier. So whether it's, you know, the TSA Margaritaville, there's a glitter Gani in there, or glitter bomb, classic ORA red Gani, just a nice little collection of stuff. But you know, they just seem to really be happy in here, and I don't want to go buy corals that are really testing stuff out. If I know it's, you know, happy in this tank, I'm just going to keep rolling with those. Another thing that really seems to do well in this tank is acans. I have my colonies. I got like 3 mini rocks that have had those colonies each probably about 2-3 years each colony. I got a couple new ones recently. Started out filling some of the gaps in the tank. But the acans, you know, they're some of the fluffiest acans I've really ever seen. So just kind of, again, rolling with what's already working well. What else I got? I got a bunch of different zoas in here. Again, the white zombies, I got AOIs. There's some utter chaos, daisy dukes. My personal favorite, the rainbow hornets. I got a little colony coming in the back, and then some exospheres. I started to get some sticks this week in there, just kind of try some stuff out. Got fruity pebbles and a Garf bonsai in there, you know, just staple aquaculture pieces. You know, I don't want to test anything where it's, you know, whether it's a mariculture and you don't really know what you're getting, but these are pieces that have been in the TSA farm for, you know, years at this point, where they can handle those swings. So trying some, you know, beginner SPS out in this tank. I had a very big leather. Unfortunately, I went on vacation and it wilted down, as you know, leather sometimes do. They just don't stand up straight every time. And it was laying in the rose petal Gani for about a week when I came home, and it was just completely melted. But what's cool is the remnants of that foot are actually starting to spurt some polyps on the backside, and it had dropped a baby, which is also on the backside of the tank. Other than that, coral-wise, I think that's about it. We do have, you know, a couple Euphilia with that gold hammer, which if you've kept the gold hammer, you know they grow like a weed. And I think that started about 2 heads, and that was probably about a year ago now. And then I had to make this pillar up front, because when you have a torch and they have good polyp extension, you never know where those polyps are going to go, and it's just going to cause issues. And especially in a small tank, you got to make as much space as possible and take advantage of the real estate you have. So I had to pillar up a little bit. So I'll probably end up putting some stuff to really cover up the rock on that pillar, but that's really made just so when that torch is, you know, fully extended, those polyps aren't hitting anything.
I'm sure a lot of people are going to be curious, how do you get your Ganies to be so happy? Your Ganies look super, super happy. Crazy extension. I know some people really struggle with that at home in their systems. I'm curious, how do you get your Ganies to look this good? They look amazing.
I think honestly, consistency is probably the biggest thing. I think a lot of people spend too much time in stressing over, chasing numbers. Like, oh, this is what the book said, and this is what this piece of paper said. My numbers have to be this. I always got to chase it. And I kind of let the tank talk to me. You know, I can tell when the tank's pissed off, stuff isn't as open. But honestly, like it's always flowing. I use all free from the tank. And that's been a staple of mine, honestly, since the product first came out. I had the coolest 5 gallon you've ever seen. I had 5 torches in there, a bunch of Ganies in there, and just consistency of doing water changes with, you know, Tropimarin Pro Reef Salt and then the All for Reef, and just keeping it as simple as possible. I think sometimes people get a little too complex and a little kind of overdo it. They're like, oh, saltwater's so difficult. Now, I think it starts with buying, of course, aquaculture pieces that have been around for a while. The TSA rose petal, which is the big one here, we've had that colony forever now. So starting with pieces that are already healthy and used to synthetic water, synthetic light, I think is a big thing. But I think just really the consistency and letting your tank kind of talk to you instead of chasing numbers.
Now, seeing it now, your fish are crazy, man. I think you have, shown off on the channel. You really like fish, right? Fish is definitely something you really enjoy. Let's talk about the fish you have in the tank. You've got some beautiful specimens in here. So
obviously the showstopper, the piece is going to be the Bell's Flasher ass out front. Super male Bell's Flasher comes from the Marshall Islands. Was a big staple coming out of Hawaii, so it was kind of tough to get, for a while, but now they've started to get a lot of ramp production out of the Marshall Islands. I've sold the fish countless times, but never really had the chance to own it myself. It was one of those ones like, I'm never gonna spend that on a fish. But we got a good deal one week and I was like, all right, I'll try it. This tank has always just kind of been a clownfish, and I'm just so over it. If you watch my YouTube channel, you'll know that my clowns have cost me exuberant amount of money and killing other fish that I've tried to put into this tank. And I've just kind of got over it, and I had ended up losing a fish in what I call my jail tank. I had like all my real bullies in that tank. And I realized now I could take the clownfish out of this tank and really do what I want in here. So went with the Bell's Flasher. And then I also got this pair of line dartfish, which I've only probably ever seen come into the store 3-4 times. We had this trio for probably about a month now, which was amazing that no one scooped these things up because they're a stunning fish. And they were always eating fantastic. And I was like, all right, if we're gonna go for it, we're taking the clowns out of this tank. I can't just have one wrasse in here, so I pulled the trigger on them, and they've been eating like monsters. They've probably been in this tank now a little over a month now, and they're just another cool fish, super unique dart fish. They're not super big active swimmers, so I don't feel bad. They're a little bigger fish, but they don't need a super amount of big space. This tank is getting upgraded eventually, so again, long term they'll be in a bigger tank, but they don't need a lot of swimming space. So I thought it was good to put them in this tank. Just another showstopper fish.
And then I saw you have a neon goby as well.
That's he's been in there for, I want to say, a year maybe now. Kind of always been hanging around in there. Just had to throw something in there because it was just clowns. And again, they were just killing everything I was throwing in there. So I threw one in there, and he's lived through the chaos of the clownfish and just kind of always been hanging around. Definitely kind of gets forgotten in this tank just because you go from like a $30 fish to, a couple thousand.
Right, for sure. And so obviously probably the only utility fish you have in the tank.
Yep.
So you don't have a bunch of utility fish in the system. Let's talk about your cleanup crew. It seems like you have a very extensive cleanup crew. As I'm kind of looking around, I see a bunch of, hermits, you got conchs. So let's talk about the cleanup crew you chose and why you went with them.
I'm always for erring on the side of, extra cleanup crew. It's really there to help you out. Yes, you're going to lose some here and there, and it's just kind of part of the hobby to always kind of replenish. But I always like to get a little extra and doing a bunch of different varieties stuff. So I probably have 3 or maybe 4 different species of snails in this tank between Necerius. Trochus are probably my go-to, honestly, because they can breed in the tank. I've always had a good, reproducing population of Trochus in my tank. Astrea are just the cheap one you can get in bulk. So even though they might not be the most efficient cleaners, you can get a lot good bang for your buck. I don't think I have any turbos left. I might have 1 or 2 kind of hanging around, but they're just kind of more workhorses. I don't love putting them in small tanks. Just if they ever were to die, they can cause some issues with, them dying off and the ammonia they can cause. Got a bunch of conchs in here. I always like to keep a nice white sand bed. Probably still 2 starfish in this tank as well, which you can't even tell. But, there's probably a dozen conchs in this tank, which for a 20 gallon seems like a lot. But I think, the white sand bed really speaks for, what they do. We got a bunch of cleanup crew. I never really do red leg hermits. I always just find them too aggressive. So I always do a mix of scarlets and blue legs. Probably got a dozen scarlets in here and then probably 20 blue legs, because blue legs are just tiny. Yes, they're not aggressive, but they don't do as good a job as some others. But again, kind of similar to the Astrea snails, just getting a lot in bulk.
And then for the numbers, are we shooting for numbers in this tank? I know you talked about consistency. You're looking at your tank, kind of making those decisions on changing things when you see things aren't happy. Are we testing actively? What are the numbers in the system?
So when All for Reef first came on the market, I was very skeptical. I was like, no way they can get everything into one product. So when All for Reef first came out, I was probably testing my tank, and this was my other tank, my 5 gallon. I probably tested, calcium, alk, magnesium, everything, probably every single day, because I was just, there's no way that product is doing everything. Now that I'm very familiar with it, I'm comfortable with its consistency. I probably maybe test this tank once a month, honestly. It's just really my routine is, I get my every other week water change. Once the algae starts to build up on the glass, that's when I know it's kind of that time for that water change. And I'll test it once a month, kind of just make sure we're in line. If I add a bunch of coral that's, going to change the consumption rate, that's maybe I'll up the testing there. But for the most part, I kind of just let it ride. Like I said, a lot of people stress themselves with testing stuff, and I'm so worried if I test something that it's like, that doesn't seem right. And I'm gonna change something, and that's what's gonna make the whole tank go wrong. Like I have a bunch of customers that their parameters make no sense at all, but it's like the most stunning tanks ever. The tank just needs consistency. The corals will adapt to what your environment is. And as long as you're consistent and you're doing kind of a similar routine, and as long as you have a general idea, like obviously like I know the nitrates aren't like 60 in this tank. They're actually pretty low. From every time I've tested, they're usually less than 5, honestly. Which again, as long as it's in that kind of range and they're not spiking, which I know they really aren't, then I don't see the need to kind of stress myself out testing. I get my once a month in there, just check in, but other than that, that's about it.
Made a great point. Every tank is going to be completely different, right? No tank is the same, and no coral really is going to act or look the same in every single system. You mentioned water changes. Let's talk a little bit about your maintenance schedule.
Yep.
Do you have a schedule for maintenance? What are you doing for maintenance in here?
So again, like the glass kind of starts to get that algae film every other week is probably about what I'm doing right now. I can kind of tell like, all right, that water change is coming up here soon enough. Scrape down the algae, do the water change, suck out everything I just kind of scraped down. I have sea gel in the tank, which I find is a great, product for smaller tanks to get some, phosphate remover and some carbon in there. There's polyfilter in here, which I think is actually a big thing in this tank. If I'm lighting candles or ever, I have a lot of aerosol stuff in this tank. It really helps with that. And I think it helps with the water clarity as well. But really, again, keeping it as simple as possible, doing that water change every other week. It's about, 5 gallons, and that's really about it.
Let's talk about now the equipment in the tank.
Yep.
I love the fact that you've kept it super minimal.
Yep.
That's something that I usually harp on people about is get all that equipment out of the tank. Let's enjoy the tank itself. Let's talk about some of the equipment now.
So again, I've, on my YouTube channel, I think I have a lot of beginners that follow. So trying to have something that they can reproduce in their own tank. So again, the all free, it's one product dosing. It's about 5 mLs a day. There's a Hydros Minnow on here. And then we got a Radion, and that's it. Like there's nothing too crazy. We have an auto top off, which I think is pretty stable at this point. But I don't have any real super testers. Nothing too crazy. We have an MP10, so it's running off the same app as the Radion. But again, not going too crazy with it. Sometimes equipment, on these big systems, for people who travel a lot, yes, I travel a lot. But because the tank is consistent, I don't mind not having that kind of testing where I'm going. But for people who are putting, tens of thousands into their tank, that makes sense. But a tank like this, it's just more stuff that can go wrong, honestly, at this point. So I got one doser head going. I got a light that's on a schedule, and again, just keep it simple.
You are the guy that's setting up a lot of the custom installs at Top Shelf Aquatics. So if you guys are looking for a custom install, Jed will be one of the guys you're definitely going to be working hand in hand with.
Yep.
Now, if people know that, I'm curious. People are probably going to want to ask, right?
Yeah.
Why a small tank now that you've gotten your own home, you've bought in this house? Has there been the idea? Have you flirted with the thought of doing a custom tank here in this home?
I don't know if I'm going to go custom. Recently, I've kind of been going back and forth what I'm feeling. Obviously, this is about a 15-foot wall here, and it kind of dwarfs on this tank. But I've gone back and forth whether I want to. There's a bedroom right on the other side of this room, or right on the other side of this wall. Whether I'm going to move my fish room to that bedroom and maybe do a picture frame on this wall, which I think would be cool, or just do something kind of standard on here. A lot of my money goes into the house itself, and I love the hobby, but you work in it every day. Sometimes it can be like not the priority when you get home. So again, I don't want to overdo it. So maybe I'm looking at like a Reef 700 right now, like a solid like 150 gallon, nothing too manageable or nothing too like out of the ordinary, something pretty manageable. Or we might just go crazy. I don't really know yet, but it's within the next couple months, I think, is when the upgrade's going to happen.
You said something I said similar to everybody in the video when it was my home tank tour. I think I mentioned the fact that, you're at Top Shelf Aquatics, you're around it so much. Originally before I was working there, we were, I was super involved with my reef tank. It was the love of my life. And I'm not saying, like you said, that this tank isn't the love of my life, but you kind of fall out of love with it a little bit, and it becomes something you just want to be able to enjoy, not something that becomes super tedious, gives you a lot of work. And so it's nice to kind of hear the same thing. Obviously, though, you're doing an amazing job. The tank is truly beautiful. I want to circle back with your fish.
Yep.
I didn't ask you, what are you feeding the fish? What's going to be feeding these guys?
So I actually have started defrosting some stuff this morning. I'm a little different. A lot of people like to defrost their frozen food in tank water or RO. I actually defrost mine in fuel. I don't really specifically feed my corals out of the ordinary. It's, they get fuel in the reef food or in the fish food. And it seems to be working. It's really just that, some mysis and some roe, and that's really about it. Every once in a while I'll get some vitamins in there for the fish, but nothing too crazy. The coral seems to enjoy what's going in there. Now I will say I feed pretty heavy in this tank. I got fish in here that are on the more delicate side, so they do got to kind of eat a little bit more. So they are getting fed twice a day. But with little consistent water changes, the tank never gets too crazy out of whack. Like you can see, there's not a drop of algae in this tank really. And it's really just, the consistency of the food as well. I'm not letting it sit for 5 or 6 days. It's every 3 days that it's getting defrosted out. But again, nothing too out of the ordinary, just some mysis, shrimp, and some roe, and that's it.
A huge testament to your cleanup crew. You kind of nailed it there. I don't see any algae in here, which is kind of crazy because I feel a lot of time people have this conception that you have to have tangs, you have to have algae blennies to really keep your system clean. I know I lean on my tang gang quite a bit at home. They do a ton of work for me, but it's cool to see that, going above and beyond the normal thought of cleanup crew is going to help out too. You also mentioned that cleanup crews, you have to replenish, right? It's not something you just buy and it's like a fish, it's just there forever. You have to replenish it. How often do you see yourself replenishing the cleanup crew in here to kind of maintain less algae?
Every other month, honestly. It's because again, I like to shoot on the higher side. Like it pains me when someone comes in, like I have a 120-gallon tank and it's full of algae. What should I get? I was like, well, you're gonna need like at least 100 blue legs. Okay, give me 10. Like it's just not going to do anything. Right. So like most people would say with the amount of cleanup crew I have in here is like solid for like a 50-gallon. But it limits my work. I work pretty much 6 days a week at this point, and if not on that, I'm filming or doing something else on my day off. So I don't have the time to really get in here and clean all the time. But it's keeping the parameters in line. The phosphates aren't through the roof, and just a good cleanup crew.
If you were to go back and change anything for this tank, obviously it's an older system, right? This is a tank I don't even think is in commission anymore. I don't even know if Waterbox is making this exact tank anymore. But what would you change with this system? Would you change anything about the tank itself? Would you change about the stock? What would you change about the system?
Honestly, there's not much. I think flow is a big thing in this tank. Obviously with the ganies, like when I got some new ganies this week, I was like, where in this tank can I really put them? Because even if you look at the 2 ganies up front, like they're not really whipping. They're kind of reaching, they're flowing, but they're not really whipping. The ones up top are, so I think that lock line at some point is gonna get changed out. There's a random flow generator on it, but it's probably too big of a size. I think I'm gonna reduce that down to get a little more spray and push out of it. But that's really about it. I have a gyre, like the AI, it was the Orbit, the Orbit 2 I have in a closet, so I'm thinking maybe running that off the back wall or something. But other than that, there's not much. I did recently change this Radion. It was an AI Prime for a very long time. Then I did some renovations of the house, and the fan got coated in some dust, and it just burned through every lens in that thing. So the Radion has probably only been on this tank about 3 weeks, maybe a month now.
What's the schedule for the lighting, by the way?
Yeah, so it runs from about 8 to 8. But I ramp the whites up. They get about 4 hours of solid white from about 11 to 3. So this is what it looks like. So unfortunately, when I get home from work, it's already pretty blue at that point. So I don't get to enjoy it like this too much. But all the Acans, the Ganies, the Zoas, they really have a nice color pop to them. So when I get home and the tank's just straight blue, like it's kind of unique because it's dark outside. It's just blue popping coral. So that's pretty cool to see always. So I don't get to enjoy it too much on the white side. But again, I think it's, people really like to blast the whites, and I think that can be a lot of people's algae issues. Having their reds and greens turned on, those are 100% zero. It's really just, whites for 4 hours, blues for the rest, and that's it.
Nice, a little bit of Gucci mode at the end of the day to enjoy, right? That's something I always bring up, is that all blues. Now, a question I ask every single time whenever I do these tank tours is, if you could give a piece of advice to a new coming reef keeper, reef keeper in general, what would your piece of advice be? I think Jake Adams really coined that question in all of his tank tours, and it's something I'm trying to bring from his content into our content here at Top Shelf. What would you do? What would be your little tidbit of advice?
you're going to have some painful mistakes. And I think you're just going to have to roll with the punches. You're going to lose some fish. Like, if I wanted to, I could do just leathers and some damsels in this tank and never have stress at all. But obviously, that's not why we get into this hobby. We get into it because we want to kind of push the boundaries sometimes. And I think understanding that you're going to have some losses, you're going to have some trying times. In that first year, I think statistically that first year is when most people drop out of the hobby. The tank is still establishing. You're creating an ecosystem, and it's just, you're going to go through some trying times that first year where you're going to want to take a jackhammer or some hammer to the front of your glass and say, I'm done with this reef tank stuff. But I think letting the tank kind of do what it's meant to do. You're creating that ecosystem. Don't be afraid to add a little extra bacteria. Let it go through the ugly phase. I really think people get afraid of the ugly phase. Oh, I don't want to deal with it. Keep the lights off for months at a time. I mean, I'll pop up a photo of what this tank looked like probably 3 years ago now. It was disgusting, but I think honestly in the long term it helped out because I let the tank kind of go through those trials and tribulations and just kind of rolled with the punches and understood that, you're going to lose some stuff here and there, but I think long term, let the ecosystem do what it needs to do.
I used to always say 1 year is kind of the goal for you to get past. Once you can get past 1 year, I'd have to say it's almost 2 years, right? If you can give yourself that 2 year span, a year and a half time to really let your tank develop and mature, you're going to be in a much better state. And you're going to, not deal with all these things, like you said, over and over again. I want to say thank you, Jed, for having us over here, letting us check out your reef tank. If you guys are looking for any custom tank installs, if you have specific fish you want Jed to source for you, be sure to reach out to him. Reach out to Top Shelf either by email, phone, Instagram. You can hit up Jed on his YouTube and Instagram. Any way possible, reach out to him, make him work for you. But this has been a lot of fun. I really enjoyed this one, showcasing another reef tank that's achievable, right? I think sometimes we showcase these really lavish systems, which are amazing to see. No problem with that. But not everyone is a multimillionaire that can do a system like that. But this is achievable for everyone. If you guys have hung out all the way throughout the course of this one, I want to say thank you very much. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell notification so you don't miss out on any future uploads.